Snow hammered down from the black sky like shards of glass, and Annie swore she could hear the wolves circling just beyond the tree line. Every crunch of her boots on the frozen ground echoed too loud, as though the storm itself wanted to swallow her whole. Her younger sister Martha clutched at her arm, trembling in the storm, their breath rising in frantic clouds that froze as quickly as they formed. The prairie stretched before them, white, endless, merciless, its silence broken only by the wind's howl. They hadn't eaten in 2 days save for a strip of jerky, so tough it bloodied Martha's gums. Hunger carved sharp edges into them both, stealing the light from Martha's eyes and making Annie's body feel heavier with every step. Their cabin, the one their father had built with his own rough hands, was gone, now burned to black timbers by a fire that had raged so hot it left only ash where their lives had once been. Annie carried the memory like a brand on her heart. Martha stumbled against her side, her voice a brittle whisper. "Annie, I can't go no more." Annie tightened her jaw, pushing the hair that had frozen to her face out of her eyes. "You will. We have to. If we stop." She didn't finish. They both knew what came if they stopped. The wolves were not patient creatures. She scanned the horizon, the white blur making her eyes ache. At first, she thought the dark shape half buried in the snow was just another fallen tree limb. But something about the way it curved caught her eye. She moved closer, dragging Martha with her, her breath hitched. It wasn't a log dot, it was a man. He lay sprawled in the drifts, his body bare save for tattered leggings, his chest exposed to the storm's cruelty. Long black hair, stiff with ice, spread around him like a fan. Frost clung to the beads and silver trinkets strung across his neck and wrist. His skin, though bronzed beneath the frostbite, had turned blue at the edges, lips quivering with each shallow breath. "Apache," Martha whispered, voice cracking with both fear and wonder. Her gloved hand tightened around Annie's sleeve. "Annie, we can't." But the man's chest rose faintly, stubbornly. He was alive. Annie felt her own breath catch as his eyelids flickered open. Dark eyes met hers, wild, burning, defiant even against death itself. It was a look that didn't plead but commanded, the gaze of a man who had fought hard to live and refused to surrender. Even here in the blizzard, her heart thudded with a choice as sharp as a knife's edge. If they helped him, it would cost them strength they didn't have, maybe even their lives. If they left him, his blood would stain the snow within the hour, and the wolves would come. She remembered the warnings her father used to tell them. "The Apache ain't like us. They're warriors, proud and dangerous. Never give them cause to owe you, 'cause debts don't sit quiet with men like that." But she also remembered her mother's softer words. "No life is worth less than another, Annie. If you can save a soul, you do it whatever the cost." The storm shrieked around them as if demanding an answer. Martha's eyes welled with tears, half from fear, half from cold. "Annie, please." "We can't. He'll kill us if he lives." Annie's gaze never left the man's. His lips moved, a ragged whisper lost in the wind. But she swore she heard a single word, breathed from the edge of death. "Water." Her throat tightened. He wasn't begging for his life, he was demanding the smallest mercy. And maybe, just maybe, saving him was the only chance they had left, too. A lone man, even an Apache, was better than wolves and empty bellies. Annie dropped to her knees in the snow beside him, her hands trembling as she brushed frost from his face. His skin was ice against her palm, but the faint pulse beneath his throat hammered on. Alive, barely. "We can't carry him far," she muttered, "but we can drag him to what's left of the cabin. If he dies, he dies. But not out here like some beast in the snow." Martha's sob broke into the storm. "Annie, help me." Annie's voice was steel, unyielding, and though Martha shook her head, though fear carved lines in her face, she bent down beside her sister. Together, The two starving girls hooked their arms under the Apache's shoulders, straining with all the strength they had left. His body was heavy, dead weight against the storm, but inch by inch, they pulled him. The snow swallowed their footprints behind them, the storm erasing any trace of the choice they had made. But Annie knew deep in the marrow of her bones that this decision would not be so easily erased. By the time they reached the blackened ruin of their home, the Apache still breathed. Weak, ragged, but alive. And as Annie looked at his frozen face in the flicker of firelight they managed to spark from a hidden ember, she felt the weight of a truth settle over her like the snow itself. Saving him would change everything. Forever. The ruined cabin creaked and groaned in the storm as Annie and Martha dragged the half-dead Apache inside. The walls were scorched black, gaps yawning where flames had chewed through, but at least the roof still held against the snow. In the corner, Annie found the small clay pot her mother had hidden in the ground, a pot that, by some miracle, still sheltered a few embers from the fire weeks ago. She cupped them in trembling hands, blowing gently until they glowed brighter, and with scraps of timber and bark coaxed a flame to life. Warmth finally crept into the room, filling it with flickering light. Martha hovered near the door, arms wrapped tight around herself. "We shouldn't have brought him here," she said in a whisper, her eyes darting to the figure they had laid near the fire, the Apache. Kahana lay motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. Steam rose from his skin as the snow melted, revealing muscles scarred from battles past. His long black hair spilled across the floor, beads and silver ornaments glinting in the firelight. Around his neck hung a carved bone pendant, worn smooth from years of touch. "He's not like us, Annie," Martha pressed. "What if he wakes and kills us?" Annie glanced at her sister, then back at Kahana. "He's half dead. If we'd left him out there, the wolves would have done worse." Martha's lips trembled, her hunger making her voice sharp. "Maybe that would have been better. One less problem for us." The words cut deeper than the cold. Annie swallowed hard. Martha was only 19, barely more than a child still. Hunger twisted the heart into ugly shapes. Annie knew it well. Her own thoughts had danced close to cruelty these past days. But when she looked at Kahana, when she saw the stubborn life clinging to him, she couldn't turn her back. She dipped a scrap of cloth into the snow she'd melted in a tin cup, then carefully pressed it to his lips. His mouth opened weakly, and he drank, though his eyes stayed closed. "Kahana," Annie murmured, the name rolling strangely on her tongue. She had heard it once before, years ago, when her father spoke of the Apache bands that roamed these lands. She didn't know if this was his name or just a whisper from her memory, but somehow it felt right. To her surprise, his eyelids fluttered. His dark gaze flicked toward her, unfocused but fierce. "You." "No," he rasped, his voice broken as dry branches. Annie leaned closer. "What do I know?" He coughed, the sound harsh in the stillness. "My name." Martha gasped and stepped back. "Annie, he's awake." Kahana's chest rose with effort as he shifted, trying to push himself up, but his body betrayed him. He collapsed back against the floor, teeth clenched against weakness. His eyes darted between the sisters, suspicion sharp even in his weakness. "You saved me," he said finally, his words heavy with an accent but clear. Annie nodded slowly. "Yes, for now." The silence that followed was thick with questions. Who was he? Why was he out here, alone, shirtless in a storm that could kill a buffalo? And what would he do once his strength returned? Martha broke first. "We've got nothing to give him, Annie. No food. Nothing. We're starving as it is." Kahana's gaze fixed on her, unreadable. Then, with surprising strength, he lifted his hand and pointed toward the back wall of the cabin. "There," he whispered. Annie frowned. "What's there?" Kahana coughed again, his voice barely a thread. Not empty, dig. Martha shook her head violently. Don't listen. He's trying to trick us. But something in his tone commanding assured made Annie hesitate. She remembered her father telling her that the Apache knew these lands like their own skin. Could it be possible he knew of something hidden? Her hunger gnawed sharper than doubt. Slowly Annie rose, took a broken shovel from the corner, and began scraping at the frozen dirt where Kohana had pointed. Minutes passed. Martha muttered angrily under her breath, but Annie kept going, her hands blistering against the wood. Then the shovel struck something solid. She dropped to her knees, clawing the dirt away until she pulled out a small hide-wrapped bundle. Inside lay strips of dried venison, hard as stone but still edible. Martha's eyes went wide. Food? The scent filled the cabin, sharp and rich. She reached for it desperately, but Annie held her back. Not yet. Kohana's gaze burned in the firelight. Share, he said, voice stronger now. We live or we die together. Annie looked between her sister's hollow face and the warrior's dark, unyielding eyes. The fire popped, shadows dancing on the blackened walls. She realized then that saving Kohana hadn't just brought them a man. It had brought them a choice, one that would bind their fates tighter than the storm outside ever could. The venison strips sat between them like a loaded gun. Annie held the hide-wrapped bundle close, the smell of smoked meat rising sharp into the air, making Martha's stomach growl so loud it echoed in the ruined cabin. Kohana lay half-propped against the wall, his breath still ragged. But his eyes steady as fire. Share, he repeated, his deep voice carrying more weight than his frail body suggested. Martha's hands twitched toward the food. We found it. It's ours, she hissed. Kohana's gaze cut to her, unwavering. You found. Because of me. His words came slow, deliberate, his English broken but clear. Annie's fingers tightened around the bundle. Hunger clawed at her belly, urging her to tear into the meat, to forget everything else. But she forced herself to think. If we fight over it, none of us live long, she said quietly. If we ration it, maybe, just maybe, we survive until the storm breaks. Martha's lips trembled, her eyes glassy with desperation. He's not one of us, Annie. Why waste it on him? Kohana shifted, pain flashing across his face as he lifted his head. His long hair, still damp from melting snow, clung to his shoulders. The firelight caught on the silver beads woven through it, casting faint glimmers across the blackened floor. I fight storm, he said, his voice rough but gaining strength. I fight hunger. Like you. You think I die easy? No, I live. I help, Martha barked out a laugh sharp and bitter. Help? You can't even stand. But Annie studied him closer. Though weak, his eyes burned with a will that hadn't yet broken. Something about that fire stirred her. She tore off a piece of venison, small enough to chew but not enough to waste, and handed it to Martha. Then she broke another piece, offering it to Kohana. Martha's head whipped toward her. Annie, no. Eat, Annie ordered firmly. Kohana accepted the strip with a slow nod. His hand trembled as he brought it to his mouth, but when his teeth tore into it, she saw the warrior hidden beneath the weakness. Every chew was deliberate, every swallow a claim that he would not die here. Martha devoured her share, eyes closing in relief as the taste spread across her tongue. Annie finally allowed herself a piece too, though she ate slower, savoring the sharp, smoky flavor. For a moment, silence held them, only the crackle of the fire and the sigh of the storm outside. Then Kohana spoke. This land, my people know it. River 5 miles south. Elk sometimes, but storm hides all. Annie frowned. Your people, are they near? His jaw tightened. Maybe, maybe not. He glanced at the door, then back at her. White men hunt me. If they find you in danger too. Martha's face paled. You brought trouble on us? Kohana's gaze didn't waver. Trouble already here. You lost home, lost food. You run from wolves and hunger. I not your trouble, I your chance. Annie sat back, studying him in the firelight. There was truth in his words. She hated it, feared it, but she couldn't deny it. The cabin groaned as the wind slammed against the walls, snow sifting through the cracks. Annie pulled her ragged blanket tighter. She thought of their father's grave under the cottonwood tree, buried before the fire had taken their home. He had always warned them against trusting outsiders, Apache most of all. But he'd also said survival sometimes meant walking with those you didn't understand. Kohana leaned his head back against the wall, his breath slowing, steadier now. When storm ends, I show you path. Safe place. Martha shook her head violently. I don't believe him. He'll lead us straight into his people. We'll end up prisoners or worse. Annie didn't answer right away. Her eyes lingered on Kohana, the way his scars caught the light, the strength simmering beneath his exhaustion. There was danger in him, yes, but there was also a promise. She set the bundle of meat aside, close enough for all three of them to see but not touch. We live through this storm first, she said. After that, we'll see. Martha's eyes burned with mistrust, but she said nothing. Kohana's lips curled into the faintest shadow of a smile, though his eyes stayed sharp. Good. You strong, Annie. Strong, keep alive. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the air. Outside, a long, low howl cut through the storm the wolves, closer now. Annie felt the sound crawl down her spine. Hunger and cold were enemies enough. Now predators circled, waiting for weakness. And with a half-dead Apache in their cabin, Annie realized they had just painted themselves as the weakest prey of all. The storm eased at dawn, leaving the world outside smothered in white silence. For the first time in days, the wind fell still, but the quiet was heavier than the howling blizzard had ever been. Annie pushed the cabin door open, her boots sinking deep into the drifts. A blast of cold air rushed in, biting her skin like knives. She stepped outside, pulling her shawl tight. The prairie glistened in pale light, a vast frozen sea. For a moment, she almost felt relief until she saw them tracks. They cut across the snow not 30 yards from the cabin. Deep, deliberate prints, too large for wolves and too far apart to belong to deer. Human. Her heart clenched. She crouched, brushing the powder away. The edges were sharp, fresh. Whoever it was had passed during the night. While they slept out behind her, Martha's voice quavered. What is it? Annie didn't answer right away. She rose, scanning the tree line. The silence seemed to press closer, heavy with the promise of hidden eyes. Back inside, Kohana was awake, his dark gaze fixed on her. You saw, he said. Annie's throat tightened. Tracks, man. He nodded grimly, pulling himself upright with effort. His body trembled, still weak, but his eyes were hard as obsidian. They hunt me. Soldiers, maybe. Or bounty men. Not safe. Martha gasped. You brought them here. Kohana's gaze cut to her, sharp as a blade. I bring nothing. They follow always. But tracks mean danger for you too. Annie set the wooden bar across the cabin door, her hands shaking. We don't know if it's soldiers. We know, Kohana said simply. I know. Martha wrung her hands, pacing. Annie, we can't stay. If men come, they'll kill us or worse. Kohana's jaw tightened. If you run, storm kill you. If you stay, maybe live. He leaned forward, pain etched in his face but his voice firm. But need choice fast. Annie sat near the fire, staring into the flames. She thought of their father, of the day soldiers had ridden past their cabin after a raid. their rifles gleaming, their faces hard. She remembered the rumors, bounties on Apache scalps, stories of men paid in silver for blood. Kohana was not lying, but saving him had already bound them to his fate. She looked up. If they come, do you have a way out? His lips curled faintly. Always way, but needs strength. Annie's eyes flicked to the bundle of venison. Each bite was survival, and each bite given to him was one less for her and Martha. Martha exploded, her voice raw. Annie, no. Don't give him more. He'll be strong enough to run, and he'll leave us to die. Kohana's eyes burned at the accusation. I not leave. You save me. I save you. My word. Martha spat a bitter laugh. Your word? You're Apache. Why should we trust it? Annie stood suddenly, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. Because we don't have a choice. The silence after was heavy, broken only by the pop of the fire. Kohana leaned back, his chest rising slow but steady. I hear them last night, he said softly. Voices. 2 men, close. Annie's blood went cold. You're sure? He nodded. Sure. The wind moaned faintly through the cracks in the cabin wall as if answering. Annie glanced at Martha, who sat trembling near the door, her eyes wide with fear. Kohana shifted again, and for the first time Annie noticed something she hadn't before. A long scar traced across his ribs, old and jagged, as though carved by a bayonet. He had survived soldiers once already. She sank back to the floor, her mind spinning. Tracks outside. Voices in the night. Hunger gnawing at their bones. And a warrior barely clinging to life, yet promising protection. For the first time since the fire that destroyed their home, Annie realized they weren't just fighting against the storm. They were caught in something larger, darker. Martha whispered, her voice breaking. What if they come back? Annie swallowed hard. Then we pray this Apache really is our chance. Kohana's eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. No pray, he said. Fight. The fire popped, casting sparks into the shadows. Outside, the snow lay untouched again, hiding the tracks that had stirred their fear. But Annie knew the silence wouldn't last. Something was coming, and when it did, the ruin of their cabin would become a battleground. Snow burned her lungs with every breath. Eliza stumbled into the cave behind Kohana, her arms shaking from carrying the bundle of sticks she had managed to salvage before the storm swallowed the forest. The fire Kohana had built earlier still smoldered, embers glowing faintly in the dark hollow, their last chance at warmth. Beside it, Sarah lay wrapped in the warrior's buffalo hide, her lips trembling, her eyes fluttering as she fought to stay awake. Kohana stood at the cave's mouth, shirtless, snow-caked against his dark skin, muscles rigid as if carved from stone. His long black hair whipped wildly in the icy gusts, but he didn't flinch. He was listening. Eliza set the wood down, panting. What is it? She whispered. Kohana's head turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. Not storm. Not wind. His voice was low, guttural, accented with the rhythm of his people. Something moves. Eliza froze. For days, it had only been the storm and their hunger. But now in the silence between the howling winds, she heard it too low, deliberate crunches in the snow, heavy. Padded. A wolf's howl split the night. Sarah moaned softly, her body twisting in her sleep. Eliza rushed to her side, clutching her sister's trembling hand. The last thing they needed was more danger. Yet Kohana didn't move, his stance unyielding, like a wall between them and the storm outside. Then, through the swirl of snow at the cave's entrance, a shadow emerged, a massive wolf. Fur as white as the snow itself padded forward, its golden eyes glinting with hunger. Behind it, 2 more shapes slunk into view, black wolves with sleek, wet coats. Their breath steaming in the freezing air. Eliza's heart leapt into her throat. "They smell her," Kohana muttered, nodding toward Sarah. His jaw tightened. Week 1. Eliza's pulse thundered in her ears. "What do we do?" Kohana turned, eyes blazing in the firelight. He picked up a burning branch from the embers and gripped it like a weapon. "We fight." The wolves crept closer, their paws silent in the snow, only their eyes gleaming. Eliza's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to hide, to vanish into the stone walls of the cave. But she couldn't. Sarah lay behind her, helpless, frail, fading. Running was not an option. Kohana stepped forward, bare chest rising with steady breaths, every muscle alive with primal defiance. He slammed the burning branch against the cave wall, sparks flying, a roar erupting from his chest that shook the cavern. The wolves paused, ears flicking, hackles raised. For a moment, Eliza dared hope it would be enough. Then the white wolf lunged. The cave exploded with chaos. Kohana swung the firebrand, striking the wolf's muzzle, flames hissing against fur. The beast yelped but didn't retreat. Its weight slammed into Kohana, knocking him back against the stone, claws raking across his shoulder. The warrior's cry was more fury than pain, as if his very spirit rose to meet the challenge. "Stay back." Eliza screamed, dragging a half-conscious Sarah further into the cave. Her eyes darted wildly. A rock, a stick, anything to help. The second wolf darted in, snapping its jaws. Eliza grabbed a fallen branch and thrust it into the fire, then brandished it with trembling hands. The heat scorched her skin. The smoke stung her eyes, but she held it between her and the beast. The black wolf snarled, circling. Eliza's knees shook. She wasn't strong like Kohana. She wasn't brave. But Sarah needed her, and so did he. With a cry, Eliza thrust the burning stick forward. The wolf recoiled, lips curling, then slunk back toward the cave mouth. Meanwhile, Kohana wrestled the white wolf, his bare arms straining against its snapping jaws. Blood ran down his side, but his face burned with fire. With a heave, he rolled the beast toward the entrance, slamming its body against the stone. The wolf yelped, scrambling away into the storm. The others followed, fading back into the snow, their eyes glowing one last time before the storm swallowed them whole. For a long moment, there was only silence. Kohana leaned against the wall, chest heaving, his skin streaked with blood and ash. Eliza clutched the burning stick until her knuckles whitened, her breath ragged. Then Sarah stirred, her voice faint as a whisper. "Eliza." Eliza dropped the stick and fell beside her sister, tears spilling down her frozen cheeks. "I'm here, Sarah. You're safe." But as her eyes lifted to Kohana, she saw something else. The warrior wasn't looking at them. He was staring into the storm, blood dripping from his shoulder, his jaw clenched tight. "Eliza," he said softly, almost to himself. "This storm, it brings more than wolves." A chill deeper than the snow swept through her, because in his gaze she saw it wasn't the storm he feared. It was something darker, something coming. The fire burned low, licking weakly at the charred sticks Eliza had piled together, its glow casting restless shadows on the rough walls of the cave. Sarah slept at last, wrapped tightly in Kohana's buffalo hide, her face pale but steadier, her chest rising in shallow, fragile breaths. The fight with the wolves had drained them all. But it wasn't exhaustion that kept Eliza awake. It was Kohana. The Apache warrior sat cross-legged near the cave mouth, his body lit in patches by the dim orange flame. His chest was bare, muscular, streaked with drying blood where the wolf's claws had raked him. Long black hair spilled down his back, damp with melted snow, his face sharp and unreadable. He hadn't spoken much since the fight, but his eyes were alive, alert, Watchful. Eliza clutched her knees, watching him from across the cave. The silence was heavy, broken only by the groaning wind outside and Sarah's quiet breathing. "You should rest," she said finally, her voice small against the storm. Kohana turned his head, eyes glinting in the half-light. "Rest will not stop what comes." His tone made her throat tighten. "You mean the wolves?" He shook his head. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into a small pouch at his side and pulled out a piece of carved bone, worn smooth with age. He turned it in his hand as if weighing its meaning. "The storm drives more than beasts. It drives men?" "Men?" Eliza frowned. "There's no one out here. We've seen no sign of anyone for days." Kohana's gaze drifted to the cave entrance, where snow whirled endlessly into the night. "You have not looked closely." Her heart thudded. She wanted to press him, to demand answers, but the words died when Sarah whimpered in her sleep. Eliza brushed snowflakes from her sister's forehead, whispering comfort. When she looked up again, Kohana's eyes were fixed on her. "You care for her," he said. "It wasn't a question." "She's all I have left," Eliza whispered, her voice cracking despite her efforts. "We lost everything, our parents, our home, our town. She's all that's left of my world." Kohana studied her quietly, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back, muscles rippling as he adjusted his position. "You are stronger than you think. But strength alone will not be enough if the riders come." Eliza's chest tightened. "Riders?" At last his mask cracked, just slightly, his jaw tightening, his hand clenching around the carved bone. "Men hunt me," he admitted. "Soldiers. Others, too. They will not stop. The storm covers their trail, but not forever." The cave felt colder suddenly. Eliza's pulse quickened, dread coiling in her belly. They had fought wolves, hunger, the storm itself, yet now there were men coming. Soldiers? Why were they hunting him? She dared to ask, "Why you?" Kohana's dark eyes lifted to hers, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then his voice came, low and rough. "Because I live, because I fight, because I do not bow." His lip curled faintly, not in anger, but in defiance. Something in Eliza's chest stirred. She didn't know if it was fear or something else, but she couldn't look away from him. The fire sputtered, throwing sparks. Sarah murmured again, her body restless beneath the hide. Eliza stroked her hair gently, whispering her name. When she glanced back, Kohana had risen. He stood at the mouth of the cave, snow whipping around his frame, his bare chest gleaming in the stormlight. He looked like a figure carved out of legend untamed, indomitable. Eliza. His voice cut through the howl of the wind. "You must choose. Stay hidden in this cave and the storm will bury you. Or follow me and face what comes." Her stomach twisted. She thought of Sarah, weak and barely clinging on. She thought of her own trembling hands, of the wolves' golden eyes, of the hunger gnawing her belly. Then she looked at Kohana, bloodied, unbroken, a man hunted yet unafraid. "Do we have a choice?" she whispered. He turned, his hair whipping across his shoulders, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in his expression. Not just strength, not just fire, but a kind of sorrow, deep and unspoken. "There is always a choice," he said softly. And then, without waiting for her reply, he stepped into the storm. Eliza's heart lurched. She looked down at Sarah, fragile and fevered, then back at the cave mouth where Kohana's form disappeared into the white. Her decision would mean life or death for all of them. The storm had eased by dawn, but the world outside was still a wasteland of white. Eliza stepped to the cave's edge, clutching Sarah's trembling hand, her boots sinking in the fresh snow. Kohana stood a few feet ahead, bare-chested, unmoving, his long black hair trailing in the breeze. his dark eyes fixed on the horizon where the wind carried faint sounds, a dull rhythm. That was not the storm. Hoofbeats. Eliza single quotes S stomach nodded. The air itself seemed to tighten as the sound grew louder. From beyond the veil of blowing snow, shapes emerged, first shadows, then men, riders. At least a dozen, their silhouettes bristling with rifles and sabers. The soldiers wore long coats, their horses panting clouds into the frigid air. They were hunting him. Sarah whimpered, squeezing Eliza's hand. Who are they? Eliza's lips trembled. Trouble. Kohana's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady, almost calm. They follow me. They will not leave while I draw breath. The lead rider raised his rifle. His voice boomed across the snow. You, Apache. Step forward. Give yourself up. Eliza's heart leapt into her throat. They were trapped, no town to run to, no help in sight. Just the three of them against armed men. Kohana turned slightly, his gaze flicking to Eliza. His face was unreadable, but his meaning was clear. This is where choice lives. Eliza's throat burned. She could abandon him, hand him over to men who wanted him dead, and maybe they'd be spared. But the thought of his blood on the snow, of Sarah watching it happen, was unbearable. She remembered his arms carrying her sister through the storm, his body standing between them and the wolves. He had fought for them, bled for them. Now it was their turn. Eliza drew a deep, shaking breath. We stay with you? For the first time, Kohana's expression softened. Just slightly, but enough. A spark of something, respect, maybe even gratitude, lit his eyes. The riders advanced, snow crunching under hooves. Eliza pulled Sarah behind her, scanning desperately for anything, a plan, a weapon. Her gaze fell on the smoldering fire behind them, the sharpened sticks from the wolves, the jagged stones littering the cave floor. It wasn't much, but it was something. Get back. The soldier barked, rifle raised. This isn't your fight, women. Walk away, and we'll spare you. Eliza felt Sarah's small hand trembling in hers. She thought of her parents, of the graves they'd left behind, of the endless hunger and loss. No, this was her fight. Then you'll have to shoot us all. Eliza shouted, her voice shaking but louder than she thought possible. The men laughed, a cruel sound swallowed by the snow. The leader raised his rifle higher, but before the shot rang out, Kohana moved. Like lightning, he snatched a burning branch from the fire, its embers flaring. With a primal roar, he hurled it into the snow at the rider's feet. Horses screamed, rearing, hooves thrashing. Men cursed, rifles wavering as chaos erupted. Now! Kohana barked. Eliza seized a sharpened branch, her heart hammering. Sarah, weak as she was, clung to her arm, eyes wide but unyielding. Together, they scrambled behind Kohana as he lunged forward, grabbing a fallen rifle from the snow. His movements were a blur of raw strength and fury, his muscles taut as a bowstring. The riders tried to regroup, but the storm betrayed them. Their horses slipped. Snow blinded their shots. Their formation crumbled. Kohana's war cry split the air, wild and unbroken, a sound that made even the soldiers hesitate. Eliza had never seen anything like it. He wasn't just a man fighting, he was survival itself, a force of nature refusing to bend. And in that chaos, she found her own strength. She swung her branch at a rider who dismounted, striking his arm hard enough to make him drop his weapon. The shock of it jolted through her bones, but she didn't falter. She wouldn't, not while Sarah lived. Minutes felt like hours, but at last the riders began to retreat, their curses fading into the storm as they pulled back, dragging their wounded and shaken. They hadn't expected resistance here, not from starving women and a half-dead Apache, but they had been wrong. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. Kohana stood in the snow, chest heaving, blood mingling with soot and frost. He dropped the rifle and turned toward Eliza. Her arms ached, her body trembled, but her eyes held his without fear. Sarah, pale and feverish, whispered hoarsely from behind, Did we win?" Eliza knelt, pulling her close. "We're still here," she whispered. "That's what matters." Kohana stepped closer, his shadow falling over them, his voice quiet but firm. "You chose. You did not bow." Eliza swallowed hard, her throat tight with exhaustion and something deeper. "Neither did you." For a moment, the three of them just stood there, bound by more than the storm, more than the fight. By something forged in blood, fire, and snow. Whatever lay ahead, they were no longer just strangers surviving. They were something stronger, something unbreakable, and in that frozen wilderness, that was enough to shock everyone who thought they would die.